Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll be seeing what's making the headlines with the editor of the Nottinghamshire Live, Natalie Fahy. We were hoping also to be connected with Deputy News Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. We're still trying to establish those connections. So for now, Natalie and I will be going through those papers. Let's have a look at some of the front pages. The Daily Telegraph reports on accusations that Vladimir Putin has ordered the abduction of thousands of Ukrainians from Mariupol, forcibly deporting them to remote Russian cities. The Guardian also leads with that, with the US ambassador to the UN saying if those reports are true, then it's disturbing and unconscionable. Well, Ukraine's president is accusing Vladimir Putin of crimes that will be remembered for centuries. That is on the front of the Metro. The Financial Times focuses on Russia's bombing of an art school, saying that intense fighting is taking place across Mariupol. The Eye carries a harrowing message from a Ukrainian citizen. Our neighbours want us dead. The Sun goes with calls for the Chancellor to cut fuel duty. That is also on the front of the Express, which says Rishi Sunak knows record pump prices are one of the biggest bills people face and pledged to make a difference. And the Mirror reports on the deadline for P&O bosses to explain the decision to sack 800 workers. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you're watching us. Well, as I said, tonight we are joined by Natalie Fahy. So let's get straight into the papers. Natalie, thanks for being with us tonight. I'm sorry we haven't got Henry for now. We will keep trying to get back to him. But let's begin with the front of the Metro and that really quite arresting headline, Crime of the Centuries. I mean, they detail there the crimes that they're talking about, the bombing of an art school with 400 people said to be sheltering inside it in Mariupol, amongst them children and women. And then a care home coming under fire from a tank in Crimea. And then Ukrainians being deported from Mariupol to remote places in Russia. I mean, there's even the word terrorism here used by the Metro. Does that give us a sense here that, globally speaking, in terms of the moral war, Putin has lost that? Or is this, just our Western echo chambers saying that? And actually, if you look at papers in India, we might be finding it a completely different story.
No, well, I really feel like there's some really worrying lines that have emerged over the past 24 hours, and you pulled out the three main ones there. Russia just seems to be absolutely going for, the elderly at the care home, young people sheltering and hiding, trying to get away, and just innocent civilians. It absolutely seems that they're just going for the jugular now, and this is it. And we'll see in a few of the other papers later that they're asking for the surrender of Mariupol at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So really now, what is there left? I mean, you've got President Zelensky there bravely coming out with he's been brilliant throughout the whole of this, hasn't he? And what he's saying there, crime of centuries, is grabbing the headlines. He's trying to get the international support he needs from the people who haven't given it yet. And there are still a few countries who haven't. But it really feels like, what else could Russia possibly do now? Where can they go next? We're seeing all these horrendous images of war-torn cities, blackened buildings, people walking along with trolleys and carrier bags, just desperately trying to get out of the country. Where do we go next with this?
Well, I guess the where can they go next would be, for many, would be chemical weapons, as they did in Syria, which, of course, the world is waiting for. I mean, are you in any doubt? Obviously, I know you haven't firsthand seen the evidence, but are you in any doubt, seeing what you're seeing, that war crimes are being committed by the Russians here?
Yes, it seems like it. We saw right at the beginning they were using cluster bombs, and, now they're just completely going for children, women, people trying to take shelter from things. They're not offering people any way out. Putin's already hugely isolated on the world stage. Psychopathic, I think, would be the word we'd probably use. He doesn't seem to care. How can anyone hold him to account now? We've had Liz Truss coming out saying, well, we are going to hold Russia to account. But how? What else can we possibly do?
Well, we
those
had.
words seem quite weak.
It's interesting that because we had I spoke to a Ukrainian member of parliament earlier tonight who said, well, the sanctions can be toughened up still. That all trade with Russia could be brought to an end, as Poland has been calling for. Obviously, cutting off all oil and gas from Russia, all trade, and then, of course, this highly contentious no-fly zone that NATO has rebuffed time and time again, because, of course, it would put it potentially into direct conflict with Russia. But this idea that there is still more to do.
Yeah, and I suppose that's right. But, you know, how many more people are going to suffer when this happens? You know, by the time this happens, we've already seen that 10 million people have fled the country. Thousands of people have died, innocent people. So what is the price? Where can we go next?
Let's have a look at the front of the Daily Telegraph. Russians accused of mass abductions. This is that third point that we were talking about from the front of the Metro, the deportation of Ukrainians from Mariupol to places in Russia. And there's a bit of detail on the type of places they're being taken to and the fact that they're being told that they might have to stay there for 2 years. I mean, it is shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this has all got really... These are claims made by Mariupol City Council, so obviously they've not been verified yet, but they are being widely reported everywhere. But what they're saying is happening is that Ukrainians are being taken to what they're likening to concentration or prison camps, and obviously there's strong overtones there of what happened in World War II, and being made to work for free for up to 2 years in sort of remote Russian cities. Now, of course, it's important to stress that none of these reports are verified, but, you know, Liz Truss has also commented on it. She said that she was appalled by the Russian atrocities and what's going on, and saying that Putin is reporting to desperate measures. So
it's an interesting tactic. It's also on the front page of The Guardian, thousands from Mariupol being forced into Russia. And it's interesting because if we take away, I mean, as you say, these are still unsubstantiated allegations. We don't know yet what's going on. But even if we imagine that there are busloads of Ukrainians being taken to Russia, that is akin also to what happened in Lithuania when the Soviets tried to take over Lithuania. And there's this sense that perhaps if they can remove some of the Ukrainian population, take them over to Russia, that perhaps from the Russian perspective, they think they have more of a chance of taking the hearts and minds, if you like, of Ukraine, which at the moment they are absolutely failing to do. The Ukrainian resistance has shown itself to be extremely strong, stronger than, certainly, than Putin could have estimated, and stronger, I think, than most of the world would have thought. I wonder if you have Ukrainians in Russia, it doesn't matter where they are, might they be able to bring real news to the Russians who are currently fed on a diet of propaganda, if we imagine they're not in concentration camps and they're allowed to mix in society?
They could very well. They could very well do, yes. I mean, they could bring them, you know, the actual horrors of what they've seen there. But it's interesting you mentioned that by removing the Ukrainian people, that's going to take away the kind of strength that we've seen so far from the people in those countries, because, you know, that's been the main thing that's come through to me out of all of this. The people have just sort of taken on arms themselves. They've blocked the bridges themselves. Even if they're not trained to do so, they're absolutely adamant that they're not going to give up their country. And so literally by forcing all the people out, taking them out of the country, it's just weakening that very strength of the population that we've seen there. But yes, they will bring the news out with them, and that will bring that out to the Russian people. But I do think a lot of Russian people already know what's going on anyway. We've seen from some of the protests there, they don't back Putin with what he's doing.
Well, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because it seems to be very generationally split. So those who are younger and able to access the internet and able to find their way through the various bits of censorship that there are online are able to get information that allows them to have a viewpoint that would put them out on the streets and protest. Whereas there is an enormous percentage of the population, particularly the sort of 40 plus, who are fed a diet of state television and state media and do support Putin. I mean, we saw a rally the day before yesterday in which Putin supporters all around him cheering for his, not war, they don't call it a war there, but for his campaign in Ukraine. So it's not that you know, Russians are blind to the fact they are just being fed a diet of propaganda. Let's look at this other story on the front of The Guardian here. Zelensky likens Putin to Nazis in appeal for Israeli help. I mean, there is a huge hypocrisy and irony here, isn't there, in the fact that that Putin has been calling for the denazification of Ukraine from the beginning, a country that is led by a Jewish president and a Jewish prime minister.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I read that you know, Israel can only put sanctions on a country unless it formally declares it as an enemy, which it hasn't done so far for various reasons, and so far is trying to play this kind of mediator role in the whole thing, which is obviously not working in the slightest. But you know, President Zelensky needs all the support he can get, and speaking as a Jewish person, he's appealing to the Israelis and saying, right, you need to help me out now with some sanctions. And he spoke to their parliament via video link and warned that indifference could cost lives. And there was no mediating between good and evil, and absolutely challenged them over the lack of sanctions and the failure to come to their aid with weapons. What effect that will have, I'm not really sure at the moment, but surely Israel needs to come out on the right side.
Yeah, he's drawn these comparisons between Vladimir Putin's final solution for Ukraine and the Nazi extermination of the Jews. How useful do you think these Second World War analogies are? We've heard so many of them across the piece for this war in Ukraine. Do you think they are useful?
I think they're useful because you immediately know what you're talking about. You know, everybody knows what happened in World War II. And that's useful for Zelensky because he needs that support. He needs to get the headlines. He needs to grab the attention of world leaders at the moment for that support. It is quite similar what's happening, yes. You know, and I do think that's probably quite useful for him to do that. And it's especially emotional for him because he is a Jewish person. And so that's something he identifies with, probably people in his family in the past who suffered in World War II. And he can see that happening to his own people again. So why would he not use that analogy?
And as you say, you've been sort of mentioning it throughout that, you know, if there's one thing Zelensky really has shown himself to be expert at, it is gaining control of the narrative and managing to push through on the information war when it comes to it. Natalie, we're going to have to leave it there because we are heading into the break, but we will be back with you shortly. Let us take a look. No, we will take a look at the weather.